The summer of 2005 baked the rust-colored trailer park like a forgotten skillet under the Arkansas sun. Dust curled through the air in lazy spirals, and the smell of engine oil clung to everything like a second skin. In Lot 17, a skinny 13-year-old boy named Eli sat on a sagging porch step, his knees drawn to his chest, a black marker gripped in his fingers like it was sacred. His shirt clung to his back in the heat, and his shoes were two different brands, both worn through at the heels. Behind him, the trailer groaned as his mother coughed from inside, a sound that had become part of the background noise, like the rattling of the swamp cooler or the bark of Mr. Delaney's chained-up dog. But Eli wasn't listening. He was staring at the old cinder block wall across the dirt road, the back of an abandoned general store that no one had touched since the roof caved in years ago. That wall, to most people, was just a slab of sun-bleached decay. To Eli, it was something else. It was empty, and that made it perfect. He stood up, his heart racing not from fear, but from something deeper, like the tingling you get before saying something you've been holding in for years. Eli walked over with the marker in hand. No one was watching. Not the neighbor who always yelled at the radio. Not the kids who called him Glitch Boy after they saw him try to dodge imaginary bullets on the playground. Not his mom, who didn't even know what he was up to half the time. Eli placed his hand on the wall to steady himself, and in big looping letters he wrote, "Keanu Reeves is my hero." He didn't sign his name. He didn't add a date. He didn't even step back to admire it. He just stared at the ink soaking into the porous surface, breathing heavier than he should have for a 13-year-old. That sentence, 7 words, carried the weight of every time he ate lunch alone, every time he rewatched The Matrix on his scratched-up DVD, every time he wished someone real would fight for someone like him. It wasn't about actors or action movies. It was about a feeling. Eli didn't have a dad. He didn't have a big brother. But Keanu, stoic, kind, quiet. He felt like something steady in a world full of sudden crashes. Writing that sentence wasn't just a fanboy moment. It was Eli putting his soul somewhere safe. And that wall stayed untouched. Seasons passed. The marker faded from black to charcoal gray. People moved away. The store collapsed even further. But no one painted over it. No one tagged it. Somehow it became invisible to everyone except Eli. Even when he got older, when his shoulders broadened and his voice dropped and he started working part-time at the scrapyard, he'd still glance at the wall when he walked by, still see those words, faint but alive. Sometimes he'd smile at it without meaning to. Other times he'd feel ashamed, like it was something childish. But he never scrubbed it off, because deep down he didn't want to. Because deep down he was still that 13-year-old kid with too many feelings and no one to hand them to. Years would pass, life would harden, the wall would crack more. But that sentence, 7 words baked into the bricks by heat, time, and longing, it would wait, quietly, patiently, like it knew someone else would one day read it, even if no one else ever did. The world had lost some of its sharpness by the time Eli turned 33. It was not age, really. It was the slow erosion of dreams against years of hard labor and unanswered prayers. He still lived in the same trailer park, though most of the faces had changed. His mother had passed 5 years ago. In the same bed she refused to leave, her hands thin and cool like paper. Eli buried her alone. The neighbors brought casseroles and kind words, but no one stayed. No one ever stayed. He now worked nights at a packaging plant an hour away, hauling pallets of sealed boxes into trucks under the hum of sodium lights. The job was quiet. No small talk, just the repetitive beeping of forklifts and the crackle of plastic wrap. It paid just enough for utilities, dog food, and the occasional six-pack. The walls still stood, faded and cracked. Its surface flaked like sunburnt skin. The words were barely visible anymore, but Eli still saw them, every day. He didn't stop or stare, not like he used to. Just a glance, pulse of memory. A private nod to a version of himself he didn't really know how to talk to anymore. Then, on a Tuesday morning, it came. There was no knock, no engine noise, Just an envelope resting on his rusted front steps, plain white, no address, no postage, no return label. He stared at it for a full minute before picking it up. It wasn't heavy, didn't feel important, but it hummed in his fingers like it was holding its breath. He opened it slowly, not out of fear, but like you would open a letter from someone you thought forgot you existed. Inside was a single piece of paper, no paragraphs, no signature, just 2 words, printed in clean serif font. Stay home. That was it. Eli turned it over. Blank. No watermark, no instructions, no explanation. Just that small command. More like a whisper than a warning. He stood there for a long time, barefoot on the cold metal steps, his work boots beside him, his lunch pail still inside. Stay home. Didn't make sense. And yet, something in his chest shifted. He didn't go to work that night. He called in for the first time in 3 years, citing a stomach bug. He didn't leave the next morning either. Instead, he sat on the porch with his old thermos and watched the horizon. It had been years since something made him feel this curious. Not scared, not hopeful, just alert. Like some part of him that had been asleep since boyhood was stretching its legs for the first time. He kept the letter on the windowsill. He didn't talk about it, didn't post about it, didn't tell his old supervisor or the cashier at the corner store. He just waited, not even sure what for. That was when the hum came, low at first, distant, but growing, like a storm without thunder. He stepped off the porch and looked up. Over the ridge behind the trailers, the silhouette appeared. Dark, elegant, out of place. Helicopter. Not a police chopper. Not medical transport. This one was quiet, sleek, and matte black. Didn't circle. It didn't hesitate. Came directly toward Lot 17. His heart climbed into his throat. The other trailers didn't react. No one emerged. No shouts. No running children. The moment belonged only to him. The helicopter descended, slow and graceful, kicking up gravel and dry grass. Eli didn't move. Couldn't. Dust spiraled around him like smoke as it touched down in the open yard behind his home. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall, dressed in dark clothing. No guards, no cameras, just one man. And Eli's knees buckled when he saw the face. For a moment, Eli couldn't breathe. The figure walking toward him was unmistakable, even through the haze of dust and rotor wash. The black boots, the slow, deliberate gait, the long coat that moved like water with each step. But it was the face that sent a shiver down Eli's spine, weathered but warm, lined with time but still unmistakably him. Keanu Reeves, not an impersonator, not a dream, not a memory conjured by loneliness. The real man, stepping into his backyard like he had always belonged there. Eli's legs threatened to give way completely. He reached behind him for the porch post, grabbing it with white knuckles as the helicopter's engine spun down into silence. Everything else seemed to vanish, the world reduced to the sound of crunching gravel beneath Keanu's boots. The actor didn't smile like celebrities do in staged photos. He didn't extend his hand or flash a grin. He simply stopped 3 feet in front of Eli, looked him directly in the eyes, and said with quiet certainty, "I never forgot that wall, kid." Eli blinked. He couldn't form words, could barely form breath. His throat was a dry knot of disbelief, his mind spinning in tight circles of questions. What wall? He croaked, though part of him already knew. He just couldn't believe this moment was real enough to say it aloud. Keanu's eyes softened, his voice low and steady. "Back in '05, someone sent me a photo of it. Fan. Said I should see it." He paused, glancing toward the cinder block wall still standing across the dirt road. "I printed it. Kept it in my trailer while filming John Wick. I didn't know who wrote it, but I always figured. Someone must have needed to." Eli swallowed hard. "That was me," he whispered. "I was 13. Keanu nodded, not in surprise, but in something deeper, like acknowledgement. Like respect. You reminded me why I started doing all this, he said. Not the movies, not the press, the humanity, the chance to be something steady for someone I'll never meet. He took a step forward. But I always wanted to meet you. Eli's voice cracked as he let out a half-chuckle, half-sob. Why now? After all these years? Keanu's expression shifted, something ancient and gentle flickering behind his eyes. 'Cause now, I figured you might need a reminder that what you said mattered, that someone saw it. He looked around at the trailer, the rust, the sagging porch. You kept living, even when no one saw you, even when it got hard. You kept going. The words weren't theatrical. They weren't delivered like a scene. They were said the way someone might speak a eulogy over a fading version of your past self. Reverent, quiet, deeply human. Eli covered his face with both hands. Overwhelmed by years of buried longing suddenly dragged into the daylight. He didn't cry loudly. It wasn't cinematic like in movies. It was small, shaking breaths, like a dam cracked silently from within. Keanu didn't fill the silence. He let it be sacred. Then, finally, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something folded, soft and faded. He handed it to Eli, who opened it with trembling fingers. It was the photo of the wall, printed on thick matte paper, corners curled. On the back, scribbled in faint pen, were the words, "Sometimes we write things that save us later." Kr. Eli stared at it. Not just the photo, but the meaning. That Keanu had carried this for years. That a single sentence scrawled in marker by a lonely kid had lived in someone else's life. Quietly, respectfully, lovingly. For the first time in decades, Eli felt like he hadn't been shouting into a void. He had been heard. The dust had long settled by the time Eli and Keanu stood side by side, neither of them speaking, just letting the silence stretch like an old coat comfortably draped across their shoulders. The trailer, the dying grass, the faded lettering on the wall, they all seemed to recede into the background, like props on a stage after the final scene had played out. Eli still clutched the photo in his hand, his fingers lightly creasing the edges. His knees felt weak, not from nerves now, but from something quieter. The release that comes when someone reaches into your story and says, "I saw it. Saw you." Keanu glanced over and gave a small nod toward the helicopter. "Got a little time left before we lift," he said. "Wanna take a ride?" It wasn't said like an offer from a celebrity trying to impress. It was more like an invitation from an old friend. Someone who remembered who you were, even if you had forgotten yourself. Eli blinked, stunned. With you?" he asked, the words tumbling out awkwardly. Keanu just smiled. "This time you ride with me." Eli had to steady himself against the porch rail again. His world spinning not with fear, but with disbelief. This trailer, this dirt yard, this version of his life. It had always felt like a sentence he was serving. But now, with that single invitation, it felt like the first door that had ever opened. He didn't ask where they were going. Didn't ask for how long. He didn't need to. For once, the destination didn't matter. What mattered was that someone like Keanu Reeves had come back for someone like him. Not to save him, but to remind him he was never invisible in the first place. Inside the helicopter, everything felt unreal. Smooth black leather, glowing instrument panels, the muffled hum of quiet engineering. Eli sank into the seat beside Keanu, still gripping the photo, still not letting himself fully believe. Through the glass, the cinder block wall faded behind them, a blur in the distance. "You know," Keanu said gently as they lifted, "you wrote something back then that most people are afraid to say out loud, that someone out there saved you, even if they never knew it." Eli turned to him, his voice almost breaking. "I just needed someone to believe I mattered." Keanu nodded slowly. "You do. You always did." They flew in silence for a while. Above the trailer parks, the forgotten streets, the fading corners of Eli's childhood, the world looked smaller from up here. Not less important, but less heavy. As if the weight he'd carried all these years had always been waiting for this moment to be lifted. Eli closed his eyes and let it all flood in. Not like a dream, But like the truth finally landing where it belonged, it was not a rescue, it was recognition. The helicopter returned just before sunset, casting a long shadow over the red dust of Lot 17. The descent felt slower this time, not because of the machine, but because of the man it carried home. Eli sat quietly in his seat, hands clasped loosely in his lap, the photo still folded in his pocket. He wasn't the same man who had boarded. His shoulders weren't straighter, and he hadn't gained some magical new confidence, but something inside him had rearranged, like the furniture of his soul had been quietly shifted into place. Keanu placed a hand on Eli's shoulder as they stepped out. "You'll know what to do now," he said gently. No fanfare, no promise to stay in touch. Just that, an understanding that the next chapter no longer needed an escort. Eli nodded, not trusting his voice. "Thank you," he whispered, the words feeling too small for the moment but still true. Keanu gave one final look, not of farewell but of affirmation. Then he turned, stepped back into the helicopter, and was gone. Just like that. No camera crew, no audience. Just a kind man keeping a quiet promise from 20 years ago. The dust curled again as the blade spun, but this time Eli didn't shield his eyes. He let the wind hit his face, grounding him in the surreal truth that this had really happened. As the hum faded into the sky, Eli stood alone for a long time, letting the silence return. He didn't go inside right away. Instead, his feet carried him across the gravel, through the sparse grass, and toward the wall. The same wall, same cracks, same stains. And yet, it felt different now, like it was waiting to tell him something new. He reached it, staring at the faint letters that still lingered after all these years. "Keanu Reeves is my hero." His chest ached, but it was not pain. It was something closer to gratitude wrapped in disbelief. He touched the letters, his fingers brushing over them like braille. And that's when he saw it. Another sentence, just beneath his, newly written, fresh black ink, smaller handwriting, carefully printed. "You were never invisible." Kr. Eli's breath caught. He stared at the words as if they were the final piece of a puzzle he had forgotten he was solving. They hadn't been there before. No one else had access. No one else would have known. And yet there they were. 7 words just like his own had been. It wasn't graffiti. It was a gift. Response. Full circle. That night, Eli sat on his porch with his thermos, watching the stars prick holes into the dark sky. He wasn't trying to chase dreams anymore. He wasn't wishing for someone to save him. For the first time in his life, he felt seen. Not famous, not special, but seen. And sometimes, that's all a person really needs to heal.